Today on Words and Numbers, quarterly reports,
Swedish traffic cameras,
sex toys at NFL games,
and Charlie Kirk.
All this and more coming right up on Words and Numbers.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Antony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
So what's new and exciting in your world this weekend?
Well, I have more listener material. This stuff comes from Words and Numbers Backstage, which you mention from time to time, but we should probably take a moment, particularly as we get new listeners, to explain. We have a Facebook group. It's not open. You have to apply, and then we'll admit you. And this
Some might call it a vibrant community.
Yeah, it's been going on for almost as long as the podcast, so about 7 years. And people talk about all sorts of things there. A lot of the conversation is around what topics we cover in the episode, and you and I do post a lot there and participate in the conversation. But the interesting thing is, we attract a lot of people. I wish we had more on the left. We do have some on the left, decent number on the right, but mostly libertarians. And we attract people who are interested in civil discussion, talking about ideas, not necessarily agreeing. And I think in large part we've managed, and that's not to our credit, but so much as the people who are there, we've managed to pull this off for the past 7 years or so. Talked about some pretty controversial stuff, and yet everything has remained, largely speaking, civil. I think we've kicked out a grand total of 3 people over the course of 7 years.
Yeah, that's right. It does get a little heated, I have to say, when the perennial debate over whether a hot dog is a sandwich or not comes up.
Right, yeah.
It probably comes up every 2 months.
And this is not a small group. There's, last count, 1,600 people on there.
17. It's been there. You haven't looked for a while. It's 17.
Yeah. But nonetheless, if you're interested in joining, by all means, find us on Facebook, Words and Numbers Backstage. But this comes from one of our listeners, Dave Thornton, who posted on Backstage. It's a bit about Swedish traffic cameras, and I'll just read it. Most speed cameras hand out fines. Sweden decided to have a bit of fun with it. They set up a camera that still fined anyone breaking the limit, but if you kept to the limit, your license plate went into a lottery to win the fine money that was collected from the speeders.
Wow. That makes me want to speed a little bit.
Is it? Why?
So I could win all the money from all the speeders.
No, you don't win if you speed. You're only entered in the lottery if you're under the speed limit.
Well, how do they get your license plate if they don't take a picture of it when you're
I would presume that they're taking everybody's license plate. So if you're above it, they take your license plate, they fine you. If you're below it, they take your license plate, they put you in the lottery. And it says here, in just 3 days, average speeds dropped from 32 kilometers an hour to 25. And what fascinates me with this is the incentives. We're so used to thinking about government applying the stick, that there's some rule, and if you don't follow the rule, we're going to fine you or throw you in jail or whatever it is. And here, Sweden has taken the opposite. Well, kind of the opposite. You still get fined if you go too fast, but they're rewarding the people who adhere to the law by putting them in the lottery. They're using the carrot as well as the stick.
Now I will tell you about how the stick is used with traffic cameras in the People's Republic of Maryland, where I used to have to drive through on my way to Pennsylvania when I lived in Pennsylvania and I worked in D.C. They would just snap a picture and they would send it to your house with a bill. And they would say, you owe us $50 and the bill was always considerably lower than it would have been had an actual police officer pulled you over and handed you a ticket.
Right.
And then they said the following: if you simply pay the bill, there will be no points on your license.
Yes.
Or you could come to court, which for me was 350 miles away. I paid the 50 every time, and boy, did they get me a lot of times.
I got one of those ones, not from Maryland, but from D.C., and this thing comes in the mail from the city of Washington, D.C. I don't know what this was. I open it up, and it's this ticket. And I said, I'm thinking, there's no way. I'm going to throw it away, figuring this is ridiculous. There's no way that I got a ticket in D.C. But then they show me a picture of my car and the date and all of that. And I'm looking at my calendar, and I'm thinking, I went and complained to my wife. I said, this is some kind of scam. I wasn't in Washington on this date. I was in Pittsburgh. And she says somewhat sheepishly, no, but I was.
Anyway, that's probably the most charitable way to end this miserable segment and move on to the next one, which people are making fun of for a number of political reasons, but I'm not going to, because I happen to think it's a really, really good idea. And it comes, of all places, from the mouth of Donald J. Trump. I'll just read you the headline, and this is an Axios headline for people who care about such things. Trump says public companies should not have to report quarterly results. Ain't that something?
Why is he saying this?
Well, I don't know why he's saying it, but the salutary effect would be that companies would all of a sudden be more inclined to look after long-term profits than trying to grab the short-term profit train quarter after quarter after quarter. Executive behavior would change overnight if they didn't have to make quarterly reports.
I don't know. I see your argument. I can imagine, however, they're simply evolving some private sector solution. Some forensic accountants are going to get a hold of whatever they can get a hold of and have websites where for $100 you can sign on and you can get their assessment of what the quarterly report would have been.
We're doing that already with any number of things. I mean, if quarterlies are great, weeklies are better.
You're absolutely right that one of the effects this has is to cause the management to be hyper-focused on the short term.
Yeah, and it's not even that, right? That from the board of directors down to top management, the incentive structure yields higher pay for better quarterly results.
Right. Right.
So that's all they're ever going to chase, because you know you're going to be here at the end of the quarter. Do you know you're going to be here in 3 years?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, except, look, I mean, this is very strange, this conversation, because we're all about incentives and incentives mattering. And here we are complaining about them responding to incentives.
I'm not complaining about it. I'm saying there could be a better incentive.
Yeah, something bothers me about the solution, in effect, being a squelching of information. That there is information out there and we're going to prevent it from disseminating.
Yeah, that's right. That would be a consequence of doing this. This is why I wanted to bring it up to you, Colt. People don't realize we don't talk about these things before the episodes literally ever. So,
yeah.
You know,
I asked James and he won't tell me.
You ask me a lot of things, and I don't tell you a lot of things. Anyway, it will be interesting to see how this moves forward, if indeed it does, and what sort of effect it has on the markets.
Get Words and Numbers on CiVL.com and on CiVL's TV and mobile apps. Regular episodes are free. Sign up for an annual membership to support our show and for access to member-exclusive content. So, before we leave this topic, let me just spitball some other things. I'm not advocating this, but I am throwing it out as something else that you could do, and that is require that any stock that someone buys, they have to hold it for a minimum period of time.
Yeah.
Well, because in effect, this is part of why everybody's so hyper short-run focused, because if the stock price goes down tomorrow, a bunch of people are going to start selling off the stock. Well, if they can't sell off the stock, you're going to be less concerned. I don't like that solution. I think I like it even less than the other one.
Yeah, if I buy a stock tomorrow and I find out something horrible about it the next day, I want to dump that as fast as I can.
But this reminds me, my father, when he was in industry, was a tea taster. And as part of his job, he would buy and sell, he wouldn't sell, but he would buy tea for the tea company. And he said to me one time that the price of coffee is far more volatile than the price of tea. And so I'm asking him about that, why that would be. They're relatively, they're in the same universe of product. And he says it's because coffees are traded on futures markets where tea isn't. And so consequently, the price of coffee as a commodity can be fluctuating, reflecting any bit of noise or news that comes along, whereas the price of tea changes much more slowly because there isn't the futures market. And so consequently, what happens when the price changes slowly, tomorrow some good news would come along that would otherwise cause the price to go up, but it can't because the price moves slowly. And then the next day, some bad news comes along that would cause the price to go down, except it doesn't because the price moves too slowly. But those two pieces of news cancel each other out. With coffee, you would see up, down. With tea, it just stays along.
But let's be clear. You should stipulate that you have often spoken in favor of futures markets.
Yeah, I think futures markets are a great invention.
So it's not. This is not necessarily a bad. Right. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a thing.
Yeah, it's a thing.
So let's move on to a bad thing. The foolishness of the week, which is going to sound curiously like the foolishness of the week that we had just a while back. Do you remember when lunkheads were throwing, what am I supposed to call these things on our podcast? I'm going to say a few words, maybe just two. Sex toys, vibrators. And
they were throwing them at the WNBA games.
Yeah, the powers that be can bleep out whichever of those two words is more offensive than the other one. I don't really care which way it goes. But now, and look, everybody was quick to say misogyny, right? It's men throwing sex toys at a bunch of women. Shame on them. Well, hold my beer, said the NFL fan, because these things are now hitting NFL fields. And it's so bad. It's so bad that some clown threw a yellow one on the field at a Cincinnati Bengals game. They were playing the Jaguars. So way to go, Cincinnati. Cincinnati fans have always been just a little off. I'm going to go out on a ledge and say this was a Cincinnati Bengals fan. But it was a home game. So, this is not much of a prediction on my part. But he heaved a yellow sex toy onto the field, and the CBS broadcasters thought it was a penalty flag.
Oh my God.
And announced as much during the game.
Oh, that is great.
Yeah. And when it happened at WNBA games, I remember just begging people to stop it. Just stop it. But my God, I love football more than I love everything except my dog. And you have to stop it.
You know what's coming next.
I know a lot of what's coming next.
The vendors are going to start stocking these things. Maybe with the team logo on it.
There are days I don't even know what to say to you. I look forward to when somebody does this at the 18th green at the U.S. Open.
Right, yeah.
Right, because sooner or later it's going to have to be everywhere because these clowns are getting attention for it. And look at us giving them attention for it. But this one is just too ridiculous. And apparently this is not the first one during this NFL season, which I'll remind you is in week 2. Anyway, probably time to be a little more serious given the times that we've been living through.
Yeah.
People don't realize that, we're on a schedule and we haven't recorded in probably over a week. And in the time between our last recording and now, Charlie Kirk was murdered. And we're not exactly going to talk about Charlie Kirk's murder today as such. But we are going to talk about a raft of what I consider to be related issues. So where would you like to begin?
Well, let me start with something that surprised me, and that is the apparent effect it's had on people. Now, granted, I come from what I'm about to say comes from a biased standpoint in that most of the people in my orbit are libertarians, conservative types, but there was this profound sense of loss. And I felt it as well. And I don't know, I mean, I've never met the guy. I've watched his clips quite a few times on YouTube. I think he's a very smart guy. But he was one guy amongst many others that I watched as well. But it really, it touched me. I still don't understand why. But it was enough that for me to note that something profound happened here.
I'll say two things. Following exactly what you have just said. The first is it clearly touched a nerve. And it touched a nerve that I was more or less unaware of. I didn't see the response, the massive response on what I would call the positive or sympathetic side. I didn't see that coming. I mean, I saw Koreans out having a remembrance in public. In Seoul, South Korea, right? This really crossed a lot of different lines. Now, speaking of lines, I think this event shows us, I'm choosing my words very carefully here, this event shows us that a line has been crossed. I don't think this was the crossing of that line. I think this is a symptom of that line having already been crossed. We have gotten to the point, and I think I know why and how, but that can wait for a few minutes. We have gotten to the point where we no longer recognize or treat people as ends. The sacrosanct nature of the human individual is no longer the driving force in most people's lives. And I think you saw this a week earlier when that poor Ukrainian girl, whose name I can't possibly pronounce, was knifed to death on a train. I mean, think about what happened to her. She got out of Ukraine and made it to the United States. She should have been safe for the rest of her days. And she was killed for I want to say for no good reason. I guess there are good reasons from time to time for the taking of a human life. They are rare, and they are not to be celebrated. But when you look at these things, the media didn't even cover her killing. There were zero stories about it. It took off because people started
from
tweeting
social media.
about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And not surprisingly, I'm going to blame social media for a lot, if not most, of our problems in the not too distant future in this conversation. But in that instance, nobody would have ever known she lived or died.
Mm-hmm.
Were it not for people pushing it on Twitter. And you wonder, Ant, how we got here. And look, you and I know the numbers, right? We are not a violent nation.
No,
we're not.
Yeah,
we're just simply not.
And anyone who doubts that, dive into the numbers themselves.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean there's not violence.
No, but violent crime is down some 80 to 90% since 1993 when it was at its highest. Yeah. It's ticking up a little bit right now. I checked the data just recently. Mm-hmm. But a massive increase, so-called, doesn't bring us even part of the way back to 1993. When you're dealing with numbers that are so small, any jump in the numbers looks like a massive increase. How did we get here, Ant? How did we get to the point? And I'm really troubled by this past week. I'm really troubled by it. And I honestly believe a line has been crossed, and I don't think that we're going to get back anytime soon.
Let me throw out one possibility. And my guess is there isn't any one thing you can point to. But if I were to point to the first time in my life that I saw something that to my mind, is in the direct causal chain to what we've just seen. It was when I was in high school and I first encountered people starting to talk about, and they kind of talked about it somewhat, how should I say, they were embarrassed to say it, but they talked about truth being subjective truth. Right. And that picked up speed, so that go from my being in high school to my first job as a college professor. And it was something people weren't ashamed to say anymore. Now, it wasn't the majority of people, but there was a cadre of people who said, yes, truth is not objective.
I would hazard to guess it is a majority of college professors in the humanities.
Yeah.
It's all I ever heard. I was such an outlier I was such a dinosaur to believe in something of an eternal truth. I would point out, look, all you people believe in a truth too. You're telling me that we should behave thusly. Why? Is it just your preference? If so, I don't care what your preference is. And they'd say, no, it's justice. Well, what's justice? Does that share in the nature of the truth? Or is it different for everybody? Because if it's different for everybody, again, I don't care. And on and on and on. When you scratch at people who claim there's no such thing as a truth, they spout truth claims all day long.
Right. Yeah. In the defense of people who fall under the objective truth banner, when I've had deep conversations with them, what I find is them feeling that the guy who says truth is objective wants to impose his truth on what they're calling his truth on their person. And I've had fabulous conversations and actually ended up coming to agreement with people who started off by saying that they believe truth is subjective. When I say, look, just because I say it's objective doesn't mean I know what it is. In fact, there may be objective truths that aren't even knowable at all.
My training would have me tell you that the best you can do, the absolute best you can do, is to have a true opinion. You can happen to be right. And it takes a lot of work to happen to be right.
And where you end up, in your case of the true opinion, or in my case of objective truth, and maybe it's not known or not knowable, the fact that it's objective means that we can iterate. We can get closer to it or further away from it, and there will be things that we can point to. For example, when society is more harmonious, clearly we're living closer to the truth, whatever that is, than we are when society is in upheaval and people are killing and murdering and stealing, all of this stuff.
And let's be clear, the North Koreans are not living harmoniously.
Yes.
Because it has to be harmoniously in a context of freedom.
Yes.
So everybody doing the same thing, that's not good enough.
Yeah, just because people are behaving in a lawful manner doesn't necessarily mean that you're harmonious.
And let's talk about the truth a little bit here, because Charlie Kirk hadn't even been announced to be dead yet when the flood of online experts showed up telling me exactly who was responsible. Well, I mean, how do you know that? He hasn't been caught yet. And look what I just did. Maybe it was she. Probably not a woman, because I understand what statistics look like. But it could have been. No, literally nobody knew. And yet everybody went. I heard that it was somebody from the crackpot left, and I heard it was somebody from the alt-right, whatever the hell that is. How do you know? We haven't caught him yet. Nobody has the first idea. Oh, he scratched trans things into the bullet casings. Wouldn't that be a really good redirect? That literally tells you nothing until you catch the guy. And then you can backwards engineer what you found. But that could have been a right-winger saying, well, what will throw them off my scent immediately? Oh, I know. That's what any smart person would do if a smart person decided to murder a public figure, which I advise against in the strongest terms possible. Dinesh D'Souza, and we really don't call out people by name here very often, but Dinesh D'Souza's behavior was like such a little troll, like the little troll that he is. And if he's listening, I dare you to come on and talk to me. I dare you.
What did you say?
He said this man was obviously radicalized at college. And this pissed me off a little bit, Ant, I got to tell you, because where did he go to college? Utah State.
You're right, yeah.
For how long? 1 semester.
Mm-hmm.
What in what manner? Online. He was a COVID student. Now, I could tell you a couple of things here that other people might not know. There is literally no one who has ever been radicalized at Utah State.
But you were a professor at Utah State, yeah?
On 2 separate occasions, yes. I might, dare I say it, know what the hell I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. But more than that, Ant, he was there for 1 semester online. Whatever he became has nothing to do with his time at Utah State, nor do I think it has anything to do with the technical college that he went to thereafter. Mm-hmm. How do I know? Radicals tend not to teach at technical colleges. So, Dinesh, what the hell's wrong with you? Throwing gasoline on a fire. Oh, that's what gets you more attention. And what have we seen? People looking for attention.
Mm-hmm.
But at what cost? At the cost of our very civility. A terrible thing happened. And I saw instance after instance after instance of people blaming whoever they didn't like, and then instance after instance after instance of people celebrating. Neither of those two things is appropriate in a civilized society. Inappropriate, all the way around. And now, people on the right are going after everybody who celebrated, trying to get them all fired. So the very cancel culture that they preached against for years, correctly, cancel culture that was being applied to them from the left without question. You'd have to be an idiot to say it didn't happen. Now they're turning around and doing the same thing. And look, I don't want to make a case that everybody should be immune. Right? There are some jobs that, you know, if you're a cop and you're jumping up and down celebrating someone's murder, you may deserve to get fired. And there are all kinds of jobs like that. There was a Secret Serviceman that got fired over it. Good, he deserved that. Some school teachers are in a lot of trouble right now. Good. But I don't see what the guy works at Subway, what he's got to do with anything.
Right. Yeah. The difference being that in your first examples, these are people who more than deal with the public. They're considered leaders in the public in some sense.
We have to be able to rely on them.
Yeah.
To implement the requirements of justice in an even-handed way. And if they give us evidence that they can't do it, it's exactly the same for me as finding out that one of my local cops here in Tucson is secretly a member of the Klan. You may need to get fired over that.
Mm-hmm.
You've told us what you are, and in that job you can't be that.
Right.
But you and I, have always been First Amendment absolutists. Well, not quite absolutists, as we've just pointed out, but pretty damn close. And people are allowed to say whatever they want, no matter how horrible. And I will point out how horrible they are, but I will never say that they don't have the right to say what they want to say. I'm going to ask how we got here, right? How did we get to a place where people say this kind of nonsense just as a matter of course?
Yeah, but I think that's the important distinction, asking how we got here. Because the fact is, this isn't a First Amendment issue. We're not talking about the government silencing these people, but what we are talking about is in the fact that you've got to live with the consequences of your decisions.
Well,
And if you're in a public-facing role and you say something like this, well, you're going to have to live with the consequences of that.
But I saw something yesterday or today that was very instructive. And it was a mother posting a video of her 2 children. And she said, the best thing happened today. And the kids, probably 4 and 6 little girls, said, Donald Trump was killed?
Oof.
Okay, I know where they're getting it from. They're getting it from the person behind the camera. And when she said no, they said, Elon Musk was killed? So it's not a one-off. And again, we're seeing people losing sight of the sacrosanct nature of the individual. They've lost sight of it. And I don't think we're going to get that back anytime soon.
But let me point to the flip side of this, which I was pretty impressed. Stephen King was one of the people who came out and tweeted immediately, and his tweet was something about Kirk advocating stoning gays to death. Right. And somebody pretty quickly showed him whatever evidence was necessary. And King comes back and he tweets, he says, I was wrong and I apologize. And he deleted the post. That's a classy move.
I don't know, man. I've seen a lot of posts from Stephen King. Not a classy guy.
Well, maybe not. I don't know. But in this particular case, that was a classy move.
Got his hand caught in a cookie jar.
Yeah, now you can say, well, he's afraid of people not buying his works. In fact, there was some bookstore in Europe that said they're taking his books off the shelf. He's a multimillionaire over. He doesn't
have to care about any of that.
Yeah. So I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and say he actually meant this, and more power to him.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people celebrating the death of someone they disagreed with. And I tried to rack my brain. Did I ever in my life celebrate the death of another human being? And I don't think I ever did. Somebody might remember something that I don't. And if you do, please tell me. Because I want to be right when I say these things. But I just don't. And I've been in some heavy places when some important people were killed. And I took no joy in it. None whatsoever.
Words and Numbers is part of the CiVL network. CiVL is a streaming platform dedicated to upgrading civilization by exploring better ways for people to organize, innovate, and thrive. At CiVL, we believe that societies flourish when their members honor the civic equality of all people and engage with one another through cooperation. CiVL seeks great minds from around the world to share bold ideas for fostering healthy, dynamic societies. By creating space for honest disagreement among people who share a commitment to building a better future, CiVL offers a refreshing alternative to divisive punditry and insular echo chambers. Words and Numbers is freely available, but those who subscribe to CiVL will access exclusive content, including regular live streams and conversations with remarkable people who are working to build a better society. For more information and to subscribe, visit CiVL.com. That's CiVL.com. Use the code Words and Numbers, that's one word, for 50% off an annual subscription. Let me turn the attention for a moment to Charlie Kirk himself, because as I said, I used to watch his clips, or I still do, watch his clips on YouTube all the time. They fascinate me. And after all of this, I started watching them more. Of course, they're showing up in my feed more anyway. And two things occurred to me as I'm watching these. One is his approach. And let me preface by saying that there are a handful of things he says that I disagree with. At least one thing he says, I think that he's actually logically incorrect. But nonetheless, he's one of only two people I have ever observed who engages in debate in this fashion. The other one was Milton Friedman, who honestly is interested in understanding what the other person is saying and treats the other person with respect while at the same time maintaining the thing he believes. he's able to separate the persons from the discussion, from the topic. That's a fabulous trait, and it encompasses what we started off with, this idea of human respect. That's where it starts. Of course, it's easy to respect people who agree with you, but to respect people who disagree with you, despite the fact that the disagreement is persistent, that's quite a talent.
Well, he was, by any estimation, a cheerful guy.
Yeah.
He didn't seem to take a lot of it personally. And people said horrible things to him. And that seemed to be just fine by him, right? And he would invite them to keep coming back and saying more things. And look, I'm not a Charlie Kirk expert. I'm not getting into any of that. I'm just saying this was a human being with a wife and 2 little children who incidentally watched him die.
Yeah. And
people celebrate this? What the hell is wrong with these people?
Now,
I think I know what's wrong with them. If you've got something to say, go ahead, because I'm about to go on a rant.
Before you go on a rant, I start off by saying there were 2 things that occurred to me as I'm watching his videos. The first is his approach is very Friedman-esque. The second, and this never occurred to me prior, but after his shooting and I'm watching this thing, it occurs to me he quite possibly would have ended up as president.
I think that's right, actually. I don't know if that was his goal, but it was well within his reach.
And what that means is there was a path that this country could have taken that I think would have ended up very well for people on both sides, left and right.
Well, it's closed now.
We can't go down that path now.
Now we'll never know. And there's another terrible thing to mention. Maybe I'll start my little rant here, because not only am I seeing a bunch of abhorrent leftists celebrating a death, now I'm seeing a bunch of abhorrent rightists asking Donald Trump, literally asking Trump to declare a civil war. And I saw a bunch of them all dressed in exactly the same way, marching through a California neighborhood saying they were taking it back. This is going to end very, very badly. Trust me when I tell you. But how did this happen? Because, Aunt, when we were young, we knew horrible people. They were out there. And we knew bullies. They were out there. And I mean actual bullies. Not what the left would have you believe bullies are. Now we think anybody who says a snide thing to you is a bully. It's bullying if there's blood on the floor.
Right. Yep.
Period. But we had bullies, and we had horrible people, and we had idiots. And I would submit, with my relatively solid understanding of ancient history, and modern history too, for that matter, that we had them in exactly the same proportion that we do now. Because nothing ever changes. Are people worse now than ever? No, they're exactly the same now as ever. So what's the intervening variable? We had all these village idiots once upon a time. You remember them. This is a phrase nobody likes to use anymore, but everybody of our age and older remembers the village idiots. This was a phrase we all used at the time to describe them. And it was incumbent on the rest of us to do a few things. We looked out for them because they didn't understand how life worked at all. And we made sure that they had things like food, right? A place to stay. This is usually a matter of family, but not always. And then we made sure that they brought no harm to others. Because that was a real problem with idiots. And we looked after these people, not like they were our own, but close. It was close. I treated them the way I treated second cousins. Right, that they were in my orbit, they belonged there, and that's just that. But the village idiots never got to meet each other. They didn't know the village idiot from the next village. Imagine if all the village idiots found each other. They would be a force. And that's exactly what social media has given us. And not only had the village idiots found each other, the mean, rotten people have found each other too. And the bullies, they've found each other. And these are our camps now. And we're all stuck in one. And I hate it. I hate it. And when I say a line has been crossed, it was crossed the day that all of these people were able to find their own miserable kind and organize. And we'll never be able to undo that. So if we can't undo that, and we can't, absent an EMP of some kind that just takes out everything. So we can't undo that, and we cannot change human nature because we have never changed human nature. This is our world. And I don't like it.
Well, yeah, let me take a more positive view here. I think the social media is different in magnitude rather than type of earlier inventions like the printing press. I'm sure when the printing press came along, all of a sudden it was easier. Not nearly as easy it is with social media, but it was easier. Add into that near universal literacy, and now you've got something similar. Now, what happened is we learned how to deal with that. And it was a tool, we figured out how to use it. I don't think social media has been around nearly long enough for us to figure out how to use it.
Oh, I would stipulate to that no matter what. We have not. I don't think we'll ever be able to, but that's a discussion for another day. The printing press only worked in one direction, and you had to be pretty well off, which means you had to be pretty reasonable and good at certain things with human interaction to be able to afford a printing press. Any idiot can get online right now and say whatever stupid thing he wants. And if it just so happens to get someone killed, well, no big deal. And I want to point out something else. When one group of politicians consistently, and I notice the word consistently, I am not simply talking about Donald Trump. I want to go all the way back, probably, well, overtly to George W. Bush. From then forward, when those on the left consistently portray right-wingers from George W. Bush forward, but probably a lot further back, as literal Hitler. He's literally Hitler. Well, if somebody's Hitler, of course you're going to kill him. That's what you do if somebody is Hitler. That's the only rational response to Hitler. Why do people keep using this rhetoric?
But notice, it's not just, I'm with you, I understand, but it's not just that they're calling him Hitler. They dislike what he's saying. And so rather than engaging on the thing that they don't like, they're attacking him. And you see this with Charlie in his videos. So many people come up and start just calling him names because they don't even know him. They can't possibly dislike him. They dislike what's being said.
My favorite thing was, you're a fascist. Okay, what's a fascist? Define that for me. Nothing. Empty set, right?
Yeah. No.
Give me an example of one thing I've done that would fall under fascism. Crickets. And yet, I have heard people many, many times refer to Charlie Kirk as Hitler. They've done it with Trump. They've done it with every Republican president from George W. forward. Probably Reagan, although I don't remember it specifically because we weren't all vividly connected at the time. It wasn't so easy to call somebody something and have anybody pay any attention to you. I mean, it's got to stop.
But I did notice so many times people are calling him racist. And of course, there's far too many more quotes than I could possibly look at in a year, let alone in preparation for our conversation. But I started looking up things I could find where I was looking specifically for instances in which someone called him a racist and why. And a lot of these examples are him talking about the Civil Rights Act or him talking about DEI. And if you look at it, and I don't want to say that people are taking things out of context. I think it's an entirely different thing.
People are taking things out of context.
But I think that's too easy. I think what's going on here is he's saying something that people don't like. That something involves race. And so immediately he's a racist.
Well, look, you can call a white man a racist in today's climate without any evidence.
Right, yes.
I'm not saying that white men, some white men someplace aren't racist. I'm saying if you call someone a racist, you better have a stack of papers to prove it. Mm-hmm. And that's not required anymore. You could just sling the mud. And I'm tired of it. Imagine what people could do if they just cleverly edited our conversations. They could make us sound like two monsters.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't take but a couple hours. Mm-hmm. The one thing I did do, somebody posted, well, Charlie Kirk got what he deserved, right? Because he said he's a big First Amendment or Second Amendment advocate. And some people are unfortunately going to die if we cling tight to the Second Amendment. I said, I guess that's straight from the Department of Irony. But then I said, I wonder what he actually said about the Second Amendment. And I went and looked it up, and it was easy to find. And the part that everybody was quoting, one little snippet at the bottom, but there was a whole chain of very solid reasoning that led to that. Very solid.
Yep.
Nothing wrong about it, nothing crazy, just reason.
It's what happens when you focus on the person instead of the argument. Someone who is concerned with refuting the argument would read all of that and deal with that.
Or at least admit that it exists.
Yeah.
Maybe reading is too hard for some of these people. But what's really been lost, Ant, isn't the ability to reason, it's the desire to reason. And I'm not sure that we ever really had much of a desire to reason, because I'm on record as saying over and over again that human beings don't change over time. And if you think I'm spouting nonsense, I encourage you, open the Old Testament, have a good read, because all those characters in there are going to be like people you know. And if you don't want to do that, we'll go read ancient Greek philosophy Plato wrote in dialogues. There will be characters in every dialogue that you will notice are just like you. This is thousands of years ago. Nothing has changed in thousands of years, except our abilities. We haven't changed. What we can do has changed, and we don't use it well.
I would imagine that it's so much more gratifying not to look at the arguments, but to attack the person, because that engages the emotion, and you can win, right?
You've got your allies, and you know who your enemies are.
Right, but if you engage the topic, that's an entirely different matter. There's not the emotional high, and I would argue there's not even a winner in the sense that there is if you attack the person, because if you and I are having a disagreement and we attack the problem, regardless of which of us is correct, we've both learned. We're
That's
better
right.
off than we were before, because it's you and I versus ignorance rather than you versus me.
Yeah, you and I have been together so long, we might as well be married. Right? It's been that long. And we have had severe disagreements. And I know for a fact I have changed your mind, and I know for a fact you have changed mine. Mm-hmm. And I never see it as winning or losing, because I think I always win.
Right, yes.
I win either way. Either I was right all along or I'm right now.
Yeah.
But isn't that great?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, sorry, people don't behave this way.
Mm-hmm.
Certain subset of people behave this way, but people in general absolutely don't. And I can predict with relative certainty that what we've seen in the last week is going to get worse. It's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse pretty soon. I worry about this.
What form will that take?
Violence. I worry that this episode will be wholly pointless by the time it comes out. People are going to do what they always do. They're going to look to get even. And this is the rhetoric you're hearing from President Trump and Vice President Vance. We're going to get even. Well, I know what that means. Everybody knows what that means.
Yeah, and that never ends. If you want an example, look at what's going on today with Israel and Palestine. That conflict dates back at least 2,000 years, probably 4,000 to 6,000 years. And I'm not saying one side's right and one side's wrong. What I am saying is what has enabled it to persist is each side, whenever it loses, decides I'm now going to get even.
Yeah, there was a curious thing at one of those human experiments that you probably can't do anymore because of the IRBs at various colleges. If you don't know what that is, go look it up. It just prevents you from doing any kind of human research in any realistic way. But a group brought a bunch of young kids from Belfast to the United States, Catholic and Protestant, and put them in the same neighborhood. They didn't fight. They just didn't. If they were back in Belfast, they'd already be trying to kill each other.
Mm-hmm.
Put them in a different context? No, not so much. So if there's hope, it's that kind of hope, right? The changing of institutions that mold behavior. It's not in the changing of the people, because you will never change people. They have a nature. It's not particularly good. And it flares up like this when they get hot with each other. And the only way to bring any of this under control is to turn the heat down. But you can't, there's no magic wand, right? There's no oven. So it's going to get worse before it gets any better.
Yeah, and so the question is, how do you turn the heat down? The first thing you do is you take a deep breath and you try and disengage your emotion and take seriously human respect. Every human deserves respect for the mere fact that they're human. It doesn't matter whether they're left or right or...
This was so terrible that the governor of Utah got on TV, and I thought he really was quite marvelous. I think he now is presidential material, but we'll see as time goes. But he said, I was hoping that this wasn't going to be one of us. I prayed that it wasn't going to be one of us.
Yeah.
That it would be somebody from another state or from another country, but not one of us. That's a perfectly reasonable thing to think.
Mm-hmm.
What was the headline on every tweet that came out? Governor wished it was a Muslim. He didn't say any such thing.
Yeah.
He said, look, I am the governor of the state of Utah, and I think Utah is a wonderful place filled with wonderful people. And I really hope that whoever did this was an outsider. That is not an unreasonable thing to say at all.
Yep.
People jumped right up his ass over it. If you can't give a man a minute to think through a reasonable thing that he just said in a time of tremendous duress and pain, what good are you?
And this takes me to my first piece of advice for someone who's looking to actually put human respect into practice. Begin by listening. Close your mouth. Listen to what the other person said, not what you think they said, not what you hope they said, what they actually said. And if it's unclear, ask for clarification before you start coming to conclusions about what the person said.
Yeah. And take a long look at the so-called public figures that you follow. If they're not asking questions, if they claim to know exactly what happened, literally before anybody knows what happened, they're lying to you. And if you act on it, you're lying to other people. Careful who you trust. I think that's probably about it for this topic. And it's been just a heartbreaking week in so many ways. And, you know, I don't want to fill up the public space with something that makes it worse. And I don't think we did that today. I think this was okay. I was worried about it, but I think it's okay. We're walking down a very dark path. And if you're on that path, you need to get off that path. We have to develop institutions now that take social media communication into account. Right? We were given a bunch of institutions to keep us from killing each other, but that only worked when we dealt with each other face to face, in small groups, in a world in which you could travel 3 miles an hour on the best of days. We don't live in that world anymore, and the institutions we do have are insufficient to address these problems. What are we going to build? I don't know. But we need to build something, and we need to do it fast. Anyway, until next time, man, take care of yourself.
See you next time, James. Words and Numbers is a CiVL original podcast. We work with CiVL to advance their mission of upgrading civilization by exploring ideas that promote civic equality and cooperation. We believe the most pressing issues humans face, war, poverty, debt, tribalism, arise from coercive institutions that bring out the worst in us. We at CiVL look to voluntary solutions to these and other problems. We invite you to explore CiVL's new platform at CiVL.com. That's CiVL.com.